This looks like a job for the Batman. Riddler, huh? You stealing my shtick?
I do riddles cold. You couldn't be further from the truth, detective. I don't tell jokes.
Another voice in my head? Well, the more the merrier! Joker! Detective Bennett! Your Clayface?
One of Grundy's victims, and Grundy could come for us at any moment.
Destroy! Name's Croc. Killer Croc.
The reach of Ragdoll is quicker than the eye.
I'm tracking a few leads.
Meow.
Excuse me?
Scandalous.
I'm the Batman. Bye-bye, Batman. Try and find me, Batman. I'm just another face in the crowd.
You read ancient Egyptian?
The pictures help.
This is a continuation of my review and ranking of every episode from The Batman, a show that ran from 2004 to 2008. So far, I've only covered season 1, so go check that video out if you haven't. I'm going season by season, and it will culminate with a look back at the series as a whole and possibly a ranking of the seasons. And also a ranking of every last episode of the show. Share this video and show your love so that I can keep finding excuses to talk about this overlooked show. I think season 1 is great, every episode has been reviewed and ranked. Unlike last season though, there are no two-parters, so instead of 12 entries, there will be a full 13. Let's go ahead and jump into season 2.
Pleasant dreams, Alfred.
Oh, no dreams, sir.
We gon' rock the game. Again, they game, we game. But they are not the same.
In last place is The Butler Did It. This episode is basically just an acid trip, and it starts off with what seems like an Alfred trip. Alfred is committing burglary, and Bruce is shocked. He thinks it's all just a dream, but of course with anything superhero related, nothing is as it seems. Now I'm thinking of the Wizards of Waverly Place theme song. God damn it.
Dreams because everything is not what it seems.
Tell me more about this dream.
The opening to the episode is good enough, but it's basically all downhill from there. Once the kick-ass intro is over, it's played as a mystery of course, and Spellbinder is revealed as the villain, which in all honesty is always disappointing for me. I believe this is his only episode in the show, and I know Bruce Wayne has better villains than Terry McGinnis, okay? But Batman Beyond did this character so much better. It was still trippy, but there was a worthwhile story with him every time. He has some of my favorite episodes in Batman Beyond, and in this episode, it also just felt as if they wanted to use the Scarecrow, so Spellbinder was just a fill-in, which I can understand. The Bat embargo seriously screwed with this show when it came to the Rogues Gallery, but thankfully Batman has the best villains in all of comics, and this show did a fantastic job with what was given.
You look like a man who takes himself too seriously. For my opinion, you need to lighten up.
The Butler Did It is, however, my least favorite episode through this rewatch thus far. It's very unmemorable. Batman is brainwashed entirely too easily. I know you only have 20 minutes, and thank God this episode wasn't any longer, but some of the most brilliant writing I've seen is in that time frame. This episode obviously isn't a good representation of the show overall, and most shows have their fair share of bad ones. This was one of only a few in The Batman. Pets is a whole lot of nothing, but thankfully this is the last episode I'll be mentioning that I don't really enjoy. I rank it above The Butler Did It only because of the villains. You have the Penguin and Man-Bat, which is a pretty unique pairing. Man-Bat basically being a slave to the Penguin is extremely weird, but the scenes we get of Batman and Man-Bat are pretty good throughout, and they keep enough of my attention. Penguin is oddly the least interesting part of the episode. Even though he's controlling Man-Bat, I'm far more invested in what Man-Bat is going to do. I do wish we had more of Kirk Langstrom in human form this episode. We only get a few tiny glimpses of those human moments with him.
I am Dr. Kirk Langstrom, scientist, and one of the greatest minds in Gotham.
The entire subplot of a raccoon breaking into the Batcave is pretty ridiculous. It even gets to the point where the power in the Batcave goes out and Batman is left alone with no Alfred over the comms momentarily whilst battling Man-Bat. It was just kinda too goofy for me. I guess this episode was going for more of a comedic feel, but it really didn't work in this episode for me. It just doesn't fit the overall vibe of the season.
Wouldn't a blood bank be more your style, Langstrom?
Aside from being a team-up episode, of course, which I have yet to mention in this episode, but this is the first team-up episode I've mentioned, and there will be plenty more of them. Or not even necessarily team-up episodes, just episodes with multiple villains in it.
I think Penguin and I are through with pets for the time being.
How about a little game of chicken, Cajun style?
I had a good friend in New York City. He never called me by my name, just Hillbilly.
So at number 11 is Swamped. I really wish I could rate this episode higher for a few reasons. I love the Cajun Killer Croc, I love his theme, something about it just works. He's voiced by Ron Perlman, who is always a welcome addition to any show. Fun fact for anyone not aware, Ron Perlman also voiced Clayface in Batman the Animated Series and Slade in Teen Titans. He is actually a massive part of the DC family, voicing 3 separate DC villains. Also, he's always my Hellboy. We love you, Ron.
Have a beer.
No, my body's a temple.
Well, now it's an amusement park.
No. The glandular balance...
Just shut up and drink it, will you?
Listen, Mothball, there's only room for one killer here. That's Killer Croc.
I also love anytime Batman gets a new suit in this show. The water suit he's wearing in the back half of the episode is great. I still prefer the cold suit and the big chill from season 1, but it's a great looking suit, and it makes sense for story purposes. Killer Croc is trying to flood all of downtown Gotham.
Croc said today's flood was just a dry run.
If I wanted to do some big city croc hunting, where would I go?
That's kind of all this episode is, but it was still enjoyable. This version of Croc is distinct to itself, and I really do enjoy it. I have to mention that this design of the character does have a tail, which for some reason I just love when Killer Croc has a tail. It comes into play when he's taking on Batman in this episode. It just adds to Croc's moveset and makes him feel more crocodile than man. There are plenty of things to enjoy in this episode. I just had a more fun time, or found more to appreciate in the episodes above it.
But I have just the thing to make 'em laugh. Die laughing, in fact!
You don't know me, you knew me. You thought Joker was a joke, that's just my life, this ain't no movie.
Kicking off the top 10 is the first of many Joker episodes this season, JTV, and I have to start this off by saying that Swamped could really give JTV a run for its money. They are extremely close for me, both weaker episodes in the season, but still fully enjoyable in their own right. This is probably one of the weaker Joker episodes, but most Joker episodes in the show are pretty damn good. The Yin stuff in this episode is very interesting.
I always watch my partner's back.
And something you will probably notice about this list is that she's involved in most of my higher ranked episodes. The connection that was formed between she and Batman at the end of season 1 is fully carried over to season 2, which I just love. There's already history, chemistry, and attachment that we have there. So to build upon that is genius. In this episode, Detective Yin gets a new partner though, Cash Tankinson, who is voiced by Patrick Warburton, who is most notable for the role of Joe Swanson in Family Guy.
No! I said I'm not hungry! Where is it now, huh? Where is it now?
And I love him as a voice actor. He has a very distinct voice, but I am not a big fan of Cash Tankinson as a character. He surprisingly will show up later again in the series, and I do hope I enjoy him more once I get back to that part of the show during this rewatch. Although I wasn't the biggest fan, he did serve his purpose in this episode, showcasing that Detective Yin's true new partner after the Ethan Bennett tragedy is in fact the Batman. As for Joker himself, he's the Joker. I don't really think the character is ever written poorly in this show.
And it premieres tonight on my very own pirate network, JTV!
Joker taking over the television broadcast is a classic trope at this point. It happened in Batman 89, multiple times in Batman the Animated Series, even in Justice League, and it's something I always enjoy. Joker is an absolute madman and he wants all of Gotham or even all of the world to see his work.
Look, I don't care who you are, you're not gonna—
Gwynplaine Entertainment is the Joker.
Don't touch that remote.
The mayor's involvement in this is basically just being kidnapped by Mr. J, but it's a character worth mentioning because he's voiced by Adam West, which is some of the most phenomenal casting ever. Adam West as a mayor in a Batman show, thank God for the Batman.
I knew you'd employ your sneezing powder, so I took an anti-allergy pill.
Nurse, this woman is in labor.
Excuse me, I was here first. My leg is asleep.
Some are silk and some are leather. They're the faces of a stranger.
Finally getting into single digits here, number 9, Ragdolls to Riches. Okay, although my rankings may not indicate so, I am really enjoying Catwoman during this rewatch. She is definitely one of the best rogues in the show, honestly just one of the best characters overall. I've mentioned how I love her design in the show. It is the best villain design in the show, I think. It's one of the least drastic changes that the show did, but she looks amazing. The black suit and yellow goggles just fit the atmosphere and feel that the show exudes. But also, I think this is my favorite version of Catwoman after Michelle Pfeiffer to this point.
How could you? I'm a woman.
I'm sorry,
This is being recorded before the movie The Batman, so that is subject to change, as everything always is.
Selena, don't throw your life away.
Don't worry, honey. I got 9 of them.
Something the show has done an incredible job with is making Catwoman an anti-hero who still leans toward the side of crime more than she does good. You can tell that Selena is a good person deep down. I know this is nothing new with Catwoman, it's been part of her character forever, but a lot of times I don't think they do the best job managing the balance act with her character. It's one of the reasons Catwoman has never been among my favorite Batman villains. She's still a great character, I have just never loved her as much as many people do. In this show, however, up to this point in my rewatch, the Batman has managed to do it extremely well.
What do we have here?
Nope, they're not in here.
And the main reason her episodes have ranked on the lower side of things for me is due to reasons outside of her. This one being Ragdoll, and I don't hate Ragdoll, I think he's pretty okay. Definitely a character that fits the realm of animation, a massive upgrade from, say, Spellbinder, but honestly, as for Batman and Catwoman, this is kinda just like the first Catwoman episode again, but with Ragdoll instead of ninjas. For Bruce and Selena, however, things do go a little further, and that's what I love about this episode. I really enjoy the Selena Alfred dynamic as well. I think that's worth mentioning just because it's something we don't get all that often. Overall, it's a solid episode that I'll never mind rewatching.
Finders keepers?
They don't belong to you.
Who then? Bruce Wayne?
Even tear me apart, rip me little by little. I don't even wanna start trying to solve all your riddles.
I feel wrong for having Night in the City this low at number 8. I feel like this placement is the one that most people would disagree with. It is a pretty highly regarded episode of the show. I think the ambition of this episode is the reason for its slight downfall. That's not the greatest word to use because it's still a very good episode. It just has so much going on that 20 minutes isn't enough. This would have benefited from being a two-parter similar to the last 2 episodes of season 1. This episode throws everything at the wall and I think more of it hits than doesn't, but I do have some hangups preventing it from being higher in my ranking.
Thought you could use some good press.
First, let's just talk about everything that this episode includes. 3 of the big 4 Batman villains, Joker, Penguin, and Riddler. That in itself is more than enough for a 20-minute episode in my opinion. But we also have the GCPD full-on hunting Batman, and the introduction of one James Gordon. Not to mention Batman teaming with Detective Yin for the entire runtime. She loses her badge, and also, this episode ends with the freaking introduction of the bat signal.
How do we call him? He gave us a signal!
And setting up Batgirl for season 3. which is a great way to end the season, but there is a ridiculous amount of stuff happening in this episode, and I think it's to its detriment, but it does have plenty to enjoy, and nothing is terrible, just a little disappointing. I'll touch on the GCPD stuff first before I go on my "this is the worst Riddler episode of the show" tangent.
You and me work together? I'm into riddles, not jokes.
I really do like Batman and Badgeless Yin versus the GCPD element. I enjoy Gordon enough, he's not center stage of this episode or anything, so there wasn't really enough to judge his overall character in the show, but from what was presented in this episode, they got Gordon right. He was never really against Batman, and that's obvious from the first moment he's on screen. He gets Yin her badge back in the end, and Yin is great as she always is. I love how much of her and Batman working together we get to see in this episode. I enjoy the dynamic between the two a bit more in other episodes, but it's still great here and probably the best aspect of the episode. It's very disappointing that we didn't get to see it continue in future seasons though. Detective Yin is basically gone entirely after this episode, which is always upsetting. As I mentioned earlier, we get the introduction of the bat signal at the end of this episode. It seems to me that whenever they introduce a bat signal in anything, it's always a great moment. Just because it's obviously such an iconic part of Batman's mythos, the ending is also very reminiscent of the ending to Batman Begins, which makes sense with this episode premiering merely months after the film's release.
Armed robbery, double homicide. Got a taste for the theatrical like you. Leaves a calling card.
All I ask is that you help me make Gotham a safe place for my daughter to grow up in.
But not only do we get the bat signal, but we also get the setup to Batgirl for Season 3, which I thought was nice. It's a simple but smart and effective way to begin introducing the Bat family.
Partners.
Now I've saved what brings this episode down in the rankings for last, and that is the villains, which I hate saying because it's the freaking Joker, Riddler, and Penguin. They are all fine overall, but this is a weaker villain episode. I really wanted more from an episode involving three of Batman's most legendary villains. The Joker and the Riddler being my two favorite Batman villains ever, and this oddly being one of their very few on-screen appearances together post-1966.
Are you pompous, puffed up penguin? Our friends make peace. Have a shake on me.
I just can't help but crave more from it. The entire concept of this episode is that much like the GCPD, Joker, Riddler, and Penguin are hunting Batman, and they are hunting him because of a deal they made to rule Gotham, which is a fine setup and all, but I would have preferred something more creative with an episode this big. This doesn't match up well compared to the Season 1 finale, which wouldn't be so disappointing if it wasn't three of the biggest fucking Batman villains. And the only villain I really want to talk about to an extent is the Riddler. The other two have and will continue to be covered repeatedly over the course of this series. Joker and Penguin are fine, both characters have better episodes, they both have worse episodes as well. They are the two most used villains in the show by a pretty large margin, Joker especially, but the Riddler is in only 3 episodes of this show. And this is by far the worst one, which is fine because this is still a good episode, which means the show never did his character wrong per se, but this is the most wrong he was done. If there is a main villain of this episode, it's the Riddler.
Lost my last chance to not be the Riddler.
But his character is just a little off in this episode. I know that Riddler isn't used much in any Batman series really because he's a difficult character to write, but I also know that this show can write the Riddler. And firstly, he didn't even tell that many riddles in this episode. It undoubtedly pales in comparison to his debut episode that we'll be discussing later on. This applies to all the villains, not only the Riddler, and it is definitely because of the limited screen time. Each of them, Riddler, Joker, Penguin, seem a bit too incompetent at times. And it's because the show has to wrap everything it's trying to do up in the span of only 20 minutes. So yeah, I think the villains are the biggest indicator here that this episode wasn't long enough. I think it would have greatly benefited from being a 2-parter, but it still is a very enjoyable and good episode overall, so I don't want to complain too much. I mean, it's still 3 of Batman's biggest villains. I still had a good time with this episode. They just tried to do a little too much with the runtime they were given.
What? Fix it, chill.
You chill.
I love the villain team up in Fire and Ice. It's such a no-brainer pairing, and I think it probably works best with this type of Freeze, where he's just kinda a standard criminal with ice powers. The main reason I appreciate this episode so much is the end, where Gotham recognizes Batman as a hero. This was kind of following up the Bird of Prey ending from Season 1 as well, which is interesting.
The Batman? He saved us. Yeah, he saved the city.
These tiny but massive progressions of Batman's character. I thought the plot of this episode was good enough. It's pretty standard, but it's high stakes, and it actually does make an okay amount of sense. Freeze, with the help of Firefly, is building a giant cryogenic machine. I don't remember the exact name. It was kind of like the ending to Batman and Robin, but much, much better. Firefly's involvement was kind of just to serve as Freeze's right hand, performing heists and stealing all the cryogenic tech for him. They didn't build on his character at all, really. He did have some funny quips yet again, though.
Brought you a present. Gotham City in the palm of your hand.
Is this a joke?
Fire and Ice is a bit of a downgrade from both the Big Chill and the Big Heat for me personally. Freeze actually has somewhat of a motive in this episode, even if it doesn't necessarily make the most sense. How long were these guys working on this cryo accelerator again? And of course, the final thing to discuss is Detective Yin. Yeah, you guessed it. I loved everything with her in this episode. The moment at the charity event between her and Bruce is probably one of the more memorable moments in the season to this point. It's funny and doesn't go on for too long. This and the end alone help rank Fire and Ice as high as it is.
Wayne, I know your secret. You really care, don't you?
Boy, you've got my number.
But since you two pointy ears make such a cute couple, his and hers.
The Cat, the Bat, and the Very Ugly. This will be the last time we are discussing everyone's favorite feline, Catwoman. I feel like I've touched enough on her character between Ragdolls and Riches and her introduction episode, The Cat and the Bat, but something on full display this episode is the Bat-Cat relationship, which yes, we see that in the other 2 Catwoman episodes, but it is really the entire episode in this one. And I like that decision. I personally don't think Catwoman is that interesting without Batman. I'm sorry, I just don't. But that isn't too much of a concern in an episode where they are literally handcuffed together. Now, how we got there was Catwoman was trying to steal a jewel, a cat jewel, but plot twist, the Penguin was there as well, trying to steal a bird jewel. Who would have thunk it? Then Batman shows up and the Penguin just has a set of handcuffs lying around for God knows why. I thought it was a pretty decent setup to this Batman Returns-esque episode. Not really a Batman Returns episode, it just has the same 2 Bat villains. The entire concept of this episode is actually that Cat Jewel and Bird Jewel combined to generate a power that is equal to the sun, or some shit like that.
Or Gotham suffers the wrath of the sun. Sun? In the middle of the night? This Penguin guy's nuts.
Yeah, logic is just out the window in this episode. This just felt like a better Joel Schumacher Batman movie, if I'm being honest. I thought all the Batman Yin stuff was great. I know I keep saying that about every episode, but it's so good in Season 2. And something I'm just now realizing is they love aiming for comedy with the Penguin. This is the 4th episode he's featured in that I'm discussing, and they have all been comedic episodes this far. I think this one works better than all the others so far. A lot of the jokes landed and were pretty funny, particularly the one where Yin says to herself that Batman is weird.
So he's a little strange, Yin. He dresses like a bat.
The Bat-Cat relationship really helped elevate this episode. Seeing Catwoman driving the Batmobile is a memorable moment from this season. There were just quite a few cool shots throughout. Catwoman and Penguin were 2 villains that played really well off of each other. The humor along with the ridiculous plot made it feel very Batman 66-like, and I respected the hell out of that.
Grundy could come for us at any moment. Let's get out of here!
Grundy's Night immediately gets points for being a Halloween episode. It's a holiday that just fits Batman. How do we not have more Batman Halloween content? Anyway, Solomon Grundy being featured in this episode was always interesting to me. There is a slight spoiler for this episode, so if you care at all, go watch it on HBO Max. 'Tis the season. It starts off with the now elderly daughters of some guy that Grundy killed back in the day, or so the legend goes in this version of the story at least. And they scare off some kids out trick-or-treating with this legitimately terrifying zombie story. Keep in mind, this is Gotham City, okay? The daughters actually don't believe Grundy is real, but then Solomon Grundy comes busting through just to destroy most of their house, and probably costing them a lot of money and property damages, which may be worse than death if I'm being honest. We get tidbits of kids trick-or-treating throughout, and I loved it. I really enjoyed seeing Gotham-themed costumes in the city itself. It made sense, but it was also kind of eerie, because the second occurrence of children trick-or-treating is at Wayne Manor, and the kids are dressed as Joker, Penguin, and Catwoman. Just the thought of a kid living in Gotham City and sporting a Joker costume is terrifying. This is something that seems to bother Bruce a little as well, which makes sense. This is somewhat like the Batman in the sense that Batman is discovering that he needs to be more than he already is.
If you consider Joker, Catwoman, and Penguin good,
I guess it's more fun to be the bad guys.
I think this entire season has been showing that with this version of the character, and later on Batman comes across some trick-or-treaters yet again, and there is a kid with a Batman costume. Batman simply says, "Cool costume," and is on his way. But it was just a really great moment and payoff to the little things they had set up earlier in this episode. All that's really left to talk about now is Grundy himself. I love that it's played as a legend. No one has actually seen Solomon Grundy. He's just this undead swamp monster that may or may not be real. The initial encounter between Batman and Grundy is in the house of the sisters mentioned earlier. I think they are twins. I don't actually remember if they are though. But anyway, the first fight was pretty good. It definitely displayed Grundy's strength well and showed him as a very formidable foe. He leads Batman in a pile of rubble, destroying the sisters' house. I really hope they have house insurance, because if not, they are just fucked. Absolutely fucked. Solomon Grundy is a freaking dick. Before I get to the big reveal of this episode, there was a pretty funny moment of some random guy telling Batman he has a great costume. Because, of course, there was.
It's quite a Batman costume you got there.
Listen.
After the first fight with Grundy, although Batman did get his ass kicked, he managed to get his hands on some evidence, some zombie tissue. But we later find out this isn't undead tissue or even average human tissue. It is very mutated. It is moving. It's alive. Yes, that's right. It's motherfucking Clayface. Ethan Bennett is back and just angry at the world. Honestly, understandably so. The final fight isn't really better than the first or anything. I just liked all the things we got to see Clayface transform into. It was the most advanced transformations we had seen him do in the show to this point, showing that his abilities have gotten even more powerful. It's a shame that we don't get much more Clayface, specifically Ethan Bennett Clayface in the show going forward, but this was a damn good episode of the show. Great Halloween episode, great Batman episode. Clayface is one of the best villains in this show.
Trick or treat, Clayface.
Joker! Detective Bennett! You're Clayface? You know that I am heading for a meltdown.
Speaking of Clayface, the first time we see him in the series since he was created by the Joker is in the episode Meltdown, and the Joker himself is in this episode. It's sort of a Vendetta-esque episode where Clayface is going after the Joker, and there's a cool moment in here where Clayface comes face to face with Batman, and of course Clayface in the series being Ethan Bennett, Bruce Wayne's best friend, so therefore Batman's best friend. It's basically their take on Two-Face combined with Clayface, since they weren't allowed to use Harvey in the show because of the Bat embargo. But there's a moment where Clayface says, "I'm not doing this for revenge. I'm doing this to assure that Joker doesn't do this to anyone else. You can understand that, right, Bats?"
This isn't about revenge. It's about making sure what Joker did to me never happens to anyone else.
and he has a brief flashback to his parents, of course. The whole reason that Batman is doing what he's doing, the whole reason for his crusade is to prevent that from happening to anyone else. And early in the episode, Ethan is on trial of sorts, and he is allowed to walk, to be a normal member of society as long as he abides to the guidelines, which is partaking in chemical testing, his DNA testing for the clay particles, his transformative abilities to be tested. And if he doesn't shift for so long, he can remain in human form and join society again, but he is looked down upon by the people of Gotham. Even when he's just Ethan Bennett, they just look at him as Clayface now, and it is a hideous view on what our world is, honestly. A lot of people just see the ugly side of things. They just see the worst in people, and since they know he's Clayface, that's what they view him as.
Clayface? They should never let him out. That's him, isn't it?
Yin is used sparingly in the episode, but I think she's utilized pretty brilliant. The diner scene with her and Ethan, which is where all those people are looking at him in disgust because they know he's Clayface. Like, they're saying, how could they let him walk and everything like that. But just the moment there between Ethan and Yin is beautiful. Ethan asks, have you found a new partner? And her response is not exactly, which culminates in the end when Clayface is trying to stop the Joker, who's broken into Wayne Enterprises, stealing from Wayne Enterprises, stealing a bunch of gold and things like that. It comes to a head with Joker versus Clayface, Batman then interferes, so it's kind of like a triple threat type situation, and the Joker kind of changes his view on things. First of all, the Joker didn't even realize that he created Clayface until he meets Clayface. Well, he meets Ethan Bennett, drops him off a building, he goes splat, and then he just morphs into Clayface, comes after Joker, and he's like, Detective Bennett, you're Clayface?
You turned me into clay! Funny, I was trying to turn you into dust!
That whole interaction is just phenomenal. The Joker is not the main villain of this episode. It's definitely more of a Clayface episode. But Joker's utilization in the episode is done brilliantly because he is the one that created Clayface. So it's cool to see the two on screen together yet again. But for a minute, Joker is just viewing Clayface as another do-gooder until Batman interferes and Clayface is looking at Batman as his enemy because he's the only one standing between he and his freedom. So Joker has a complete 180 on things. He says, Clayface, you would make a way better villain than you would hero. So why don't you join your papa? Which is, it's really weird hearing Joker call himself papa, which I guess he does that in Batman Beyond Return of the Joker. He is the one that created Clayface, so I guess he has a little bit of a point. But then they stop the Joker, then Clayface and Batman. Well, not even Clayface and Batman. Clayface escapes the elevator shaft, which is where they were fighting, and Detective Yin is there to confront him. And Clayface is just saying, let me walk. And Batman comes in, and Ethan Bennett has this whole spill about he's no longer Bennett, say your goodbyes. This is the last time you'll ever see him. Morphs into Clayface. And then at the beginning of the episode, Batman threw a freeze pellet at Clayface. It sunk into him, froze him. That's how he stopped Clayface in the beginning when Clayface broke into the Joker's cell, which was the entire setup of this episode. Yin does the exact same thing at the end. In Clayface, Ethan Bennett's response is, I wasn't expecting that from you, Yin. I guess you really have found a new partner. And it's a beautiful way to end the episode. I'm so sad that we don't get more of Yin after season 2 of this show. It is a tragedy because I think she is an amazing character, honestly. But Meltdown all around, it's a solid episode. It's a fun watch. It used to be one of my absolute favorites, and it probably still is up there for me, but like it used to be like first, second favorite episode of the show growing up. But it's dropped a little bit, but there's a lot of competition in the show. The show is just all the way around brilliant.
Didn't expect that from you, Yin. I guess you do have a new partner.
What makes you so sure Joker will be willing to cooperate?
Another voice in my head? Well, the more the merrier!
We're happy here in our happy house. Oh, it's such fun.
Strange Minds is just a fantastic exploration into the Joker's psyche. Like, this episode's just insane, and I honestly love it. As the title would indicate, the episode stars Professor Hugo Strange, who was also briefly mentioned in the last episode I discussed, Meltdown. Strange, from what I remember, is honestly one of the best villains in the show. Their take on him is just intriguing to me. But Hugo is just really the setup for this episode, having just recently developed a machine that can take you inside the mind of another individual. And yeah, so Strange and Batman both, of course, go inside of the Joker's mind to find where he's keeping Detective Yin, whom he abducted at the start of the episode.
Or, in this case, my lovely diva, Detective Yin.
With how wacky and insane this episode is just simply for being in the Joker's mind, it is also quite dark because, well, you're in the Joker's mind. Not only that, but you explore a lot of Batman's mind. There are many moments throughout this episode where it's just having like PTSD type flashes, like hallucinations almost, of Yin asking Batman, save me, why couldn't you save me, things like that. And you can see that's just eating away at Batman. Like, he just wants to save Yin. He sees her as a friend now, but if this was anyone, Batman would just want to know where they are to save them, because that's Batman's whole deal, right?
Detective Yin.
Why didn't you save me, Batman?
Batman at one point confronts like the last fragment of the Joker's former self before he became the Joker, I guess, trying to get information on where he's keeping Yin. And once this dude's about to spill it because he's not completely gone, the Joker comes from the vat of acid that he was born and sends this dude into the abyss because he was going to show Batman some family files. And
around the corner to your... Now, what did we discuss about giving away family secrets?
And I don't know, I like how this show, like, shows you the Joker's origin, how he became the Joker. It's like the Under the Red Hood storyline, pretty much. But they never go that deep with it, they just show you flashes. Like, if you're a fan, you can appreciate that. So I love that the show does things like that. It's not just strictly a show that's there to be there. Like, they actually cared about the character of Batman, his world, and his rogues. Like, the show just has a lot of appreciation for the character, and that's what you want out of any Batman show. And it's episodes like Strange Minds and the two that are going to be above it that just make me sing this show's praises. They are phenomenal episodes. Like, it's a perfect way to spend 20 minutes if you're a Batman fan, I think. So before they do go into the Joker's mind, they describe the device as like a two-way radio transmission. So when Batman is confronting the Joker for like the final time in the Joker's mind, he flashes back to that, remembers it. So he brings the Joker into his mind and they're like back in reality. So Joker just thinks he's woken up and he spills where Yin was because he sees Yin right there. He's like, you got Yin under the opera, whatever it was, the opera stage, didn't you? And then like they all turn into Batman and smile, and it's like, I don't know, if it's your first time watching the episode, I don't know if you'll see it coming, because I honestly didn't. I always remember that moment now, so like rewatching it just is never the same. But I remember the first time I watched it not knowing that. I was like, Batman is a motherfucking G. This is why we love that character so much.
Wait a minute.
So yeah, Batman defeats the Joker by taking them outside of the Joker's mind into Batman's mind, and then Batman snaps back into reality, goes to save Yin in the nick of time. The countdown stops at 2 seconds, not 1, which I personally appreciated because it's such a trope to do it at 1. At least you gave us that extra second. You know, Batman needs to stop one of these at like 7 every now and then. Also, Batman was kind of going insane, which, well, we've seen in a previous episode. So the Joker keeps getting to this guy. This guy being Batman, of course. And Alfred is thankfully there to snap him out this time. Like, Master Bruce, don't go insane, because that's going to be very sad and Gotham is going to die. And Bruce is like, shit, yeah, no, I'm the Batman. I'm gonna survive. I always do, because I'm the Batman. Hugo Strange's, like, incorporation in the episode was really interesting. I didn't really care about him at all once he went into the Joker's mind, but at the end, there's, like, this cool moment where he's basically kind of calling Joker a pussy. He's like, tears of the clown. And he's like, he's so far from getting to the other side, and he's, like, got a picture of Batman. So, he wants to know much more about Batman than they previously let on. But of course he does. He's Hugo Strange.
So many more roads to cross before I can get to the other side. I'm the Batman.
I suggest you get away from me, 'cause I'm losing my mind.
Next episode, though, I speak to Batman going insane. In this episode, he also goes insane. The Laughing Bat is a pretty crazy episode. Like, the fact that this exists is simply awesome. Joker has decided to dress up as Batman himself and punish civilians for victimless crimes, the smallest of the small. He gasses a jaywalker, a grandma for driving with her turn signal on for 3 blocks, and the mayor's wife for using 11 items and a 10-item checkout. But my favorite of them all has to be when he confronts the 2 little girls for graffiti.
But that's why I became a crime fighter, to take out garbage like you.
Batman intervenes to keep these children from facing the Joker's laughing gas. Joker says he's tired of Batman always getting the better of him, so he decided instead of beating the Bat, he'd be the Bat. Joker actually gets the better of Batman in this fight, gassing him. Before doing so, he says Batman needs a Joker.
Joker? Where?
So I don't know, it's just kind of wild. There's an episode of television where the Joker is posing as Batman and Batman is laughing maniacally through most of it. This episode is kind of silly, but it's also kind of dark. Joker has a new string of gas that Bruce doesn't yet have the antidote for, so Batman must go find Joker before his time is up so he doesn't die, and so none of the other infected die. Although that unlucky jaywalker probably bit the dust, seeing as Batman only had an hour left to live before going to confront Joker one last time.
I have an hour left to live.
Penguin's incorporation in the episode is fun. He's just kind of there as a means to bring Batman and Joker back together in a timely manner. And I do appreciate they use one of the actual rogues instead of some random thug or civilian. Overall, The Laughing Bat is a great episode. It's just a really good, fun Joker episode.
Okay, now you two are starting to creep me out.
Someone is very bright. Step into the light so the Riddler can see you.
Come on, Riddled is probably the best villain introductory episode in the entire show. It showcases the Riddler perfectly. It shows how formidable of a foe to Batman he is. It basically shows that Batman is the only one in Gotham capable of stopping this guy. The GCPD don't stand a chance. Robert Englund is phenomenal voicing Mr. Edward Nygma. As far as character goes, this is one of my favorite Riddlers, although we get very few episodes with him. He has a standout villain from the show, and I think both his solo episodes are fantastic and among the best of the best when it comes to the Batman. The actual riddles were good enough, some were fairly easy, but they even point that out at times throughout the episode.
Gotham Bridge. 2-year-old could have figured that one out.
With how this specific episode is written, the riddles themselves don't really matter, because Batman eventually figures out that Riddler has been leading them away from the actual scene of the crime this whole time. Riddler's plan this episode is to upload all of Gotham's data onto his mainframe, so he has anything he needs at the click of a button. Knowledge is power, you know?
As you've been learning, knowledge is power.
I feel like this is also the first episode that shows you how strong Batman and Yin are as a unit. At one point, Riddler has Batman strapped to a lie detector, and if he fibs, then Yin gets zapped. So Yin goats Riddler, and Batman tells a tale that leads to Nygma being zapped, and although he gets away for a moment, it's ultimately his downfall. Riddler is arrested and tells the police commissioner that Yin is working with the Batman, but he of course says it in the form of a riddle. I just love his compulsion to always tell riddles. He can't help himself, and that's how Batman wins. When it comes to the Batman, I think Riddled is easily a top tier episode and among the best.
Inside my brain. Stop speaking in riddles.
So there it is, my completed ranking of every episode from the Batman Season 2. Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. Sorry this video took a while. Hopefully it doesn't get copyrighted or anything like that. Hopefully we're all good. Thank you so much for watching. Share your love for the video, and I will see you guys next time.